This makes great radio.
This is great radio. No, do not cut this. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Marvel Reread Club. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing all right, thanks. I spent the morning doing laser repair work for my Laser Steve maintenance business that I've got, and that has really picked up in the last little bit. So that feels good to have my expertise be needed by people and be appreciated by folks.
Very good.
Yeah, that's what I was doing this morning, and our daughter is home for a little bit here, and Amy is out of town on a business trip. So that's everything going on here.
Yes, things are going very well here. My son, even though he's a defender on a soccer team, actually scored a goal because they moved him up to striker just for a little bit. And while he was striker, he scored the only goal of the game.
Wow.
Only goal of his side of the game. But I unfortunately did not see that. I was not there for that game. But my daughter is currently at her digital art class. She has been preparing to enter the world of comics herself as a webcomic artist.
Oh.
But she wants to get it perfect before she releases it. And we're like, no, that's not the way it works. The webcomics get better and better as you go. You don't perfect them before you release them. But she's been working on this webcomic for years and has never released it.
Really? What programs is she using?
Procreate.
Okay, Procreate. Are you familiar with Clip Studio Paint?
Nope.
That's the standard one that comics artists I know tend to use. Although lots of people do use Procreate these days, too.
Good to know. That's what's going on here. Should we go ahead and jump into the books of December 1967?
Well, before we do, one thing, I'm currently editing the episode the listeners will have just listened to a week ago. And I decided to look up the whole thing about are Talbot and Ross in the Army or the Air Force? And when I looked up Talbot's page on Wikipedia, it lists both the Air Force and the Army as team affiliations for him.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, let me go ahead and search for the words Army and Air Force throughout this thing. And they assiduously avoid saying he is in one or he is in the other at any given point.
Okay.
And for Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, for his, they list him as being a member of the Army Air Corps and the Air Force. So that would seem to indicate that he is Air Force. The Army Air Corps is what became the Air Force eventually.
Okay.
Clearly, it is not clear.
Yes.
It's not just us. It's not that we missed something. Or
Much confusion in Marvel Comics, both with Flash Thompson over in Spider-Man and with General Ross and Major Talbot over in Hulk. Much confusion as to which branch of the service they are in.
Yes. So I believe I took Amazing Spider-Man and X-Men, so that means that you are going to get Fantastic Four today.
All right. But of course, we have not 4 books today. We have 5. Marvel Comics bumps up to 10 superhero books this month, which just messes up all our plans. We've already been ignoring Sergeant Fury. We've been ignoring Not Brandeck, but we cannot ignore the new book they have added. So we are going to have a surprise 5th book today, which I guess we will save to the end.
Yes, although you kind of ruined the surprise. I was going to pretend like we only had 4 issues and then be like, but wait, there's more. But
wait, there's more. Now I've ruined the surprise. Okay. Everybody, let's go ahead and save that surprise for the end. And let's go ahead and do Fantastic Four number 69. That's no surprise. We've been covering Fantastic Four every month of this podcast. And unfortunately, we are still in the middle of what I declared last time to be the weakest Lee Kirby Fantastic Four storyline, the Santini storyline, where the Mad Thinker has gone undercover as a scientist named Santini, offering to cure the Thing, but he really just wanted to turn the Thing into a mad berserker, which he has done.
So you think that this is weaker than some of their earliest stuff in the first couple of years, where they hadn't really found their footing yet? Or are you saying, like, since Sinnott joined the team?
I would say all told, because at least early on, they were done-in-one stories. I have a lot of affection for done-in-one stories. I think that even if you have a weaker story like The Miracle Man or like The Infant Terrible or whatever the early stories were that were considered to be weaker stories, I have a tremendous amount of affection for them. I liked the inking more than you did at the time, but I think that I have a tremendous amount of affection for those done-in-one stories, whereas this story I just find to be so flabby, this 4-part story.
I wasn't really defending this story. I was just That's a broader statement than I would necessarily have made, but I just wanted to clarify it, and you did.
Okay, so on the cover, we've got Wild Ben Grimm on top of a skyscraper looking very much like King Kong with jet planes circling him, destroying the skyscraper. You just know from looking at this cover that they're going to have to reveal on the inside that this is an abandoned building because, once again, Kirby is tearing down a building and Stan Lee has to hastily clarify that there is no one inside.
They actually specify that it is scheduled to be torn down for the Cross Manhattan Expressway, which of course was the one where Robert Moses was finally defeated and was not able to get that made.
Yes.
So he destroyed this building. Maybe it didn't need to be destroyed.
Yes. This is by Ben Betrayed. Why are Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby the most honored creative team in all of comicdom? This Marvel masterwork will give you a few clues. Dazzling delineation, Joe Sinnott, lustrous lettering, Artie Simek. So, Ben's going crazy. He's stacking the Fantastic Four. They're throwing up force shields. They're doing everything they can. There's been an odd tendency recently to have Johnny in his civvies all the time. I guess because he's always hanging out with Crystal, who is also in her civvies, although she's always got that odd black headband on. Johnny, flames on, in his civvies, is trying to help the Fantastic Four as much as he can. Finally, Santini reveals that he's been the Mad Thinker all this time, as we pointed out last issue, that Stan Lee was betrayed by his own strong characterization because he was acting so much like the Mad Thinker. It wasn't much of a surprise. They fight for several more pages. This leaves Mad Thinker alone inside the Baxter building. He finds the negative zone complex, so that's not good. He's trying to get in. Says, what does it mean? What if I stumbled into? I always like it when Reed turns himself into a big flying wing, and we've got lots of that here. Yes, so we get to the pages you were talking about where Robert Moses is not specifically name-checked, but Ben does say, all you gotta do is reach that old, empty 10-story tower just ahead. It's going to be torn down anyway to make room for the new expressway. And since I'm a real big-hearted, public-spirited citizen, I'll just kind of speed up the job a little bit. Nothing in the art to indicate this is an abandoned building. There is no sign saying recently abandoned. And we all know in New York that the first step is you put up the scaffolding around the building. There's no scaffolding around this building. They do send jets to go attack Ben, making this very much a King Kong type thing. The real Santini wakes up being guarded by an android. But then the issue ends rather anticlimactically. They fight Ben for a long time, but then eventually Ben just sort of gets away and they get away and the fight doesn't culminate. It doesn't escalate. And we end with a fireman saying, when someone like him turns killer, you can't take any chances. He's got to be stopped for good, like you'd stop a mad dog. And Ben Grimm has now put on some clothes and he says, Richard's turned everyone against me, but I ain't going to help him. I know all his tricks, all his secrets. And I got all the muscle I need to finish off the FF forever. It says next issue, 1 down, 2 to go. Very, very little happens in this issue. You know, it's not even like a big Hulk thing, knockdown, drag out fight or something, which is worth watching just to watch it. You know, they never even land any good blows on each other here. This is not a knockdown, drag out fight. That's all I want. If I'm going to see the thing fighting for an issue, I want it to be 2 things. I want it to be knockdown and I want it to be drag out. And this is neither knockdown nor drag out. I don't know. What do you think of this issue?
I'm not going to argue with anything that you said. I'll just go ahead and focus in on a couple of little things that jumped out at me. At one point, Thing has gotten his hand on a weapon of Reed's, and he's turning it on them. And it's called the High Voltage Discharger, which is a handheld weapon. And a handheld high voltage discharger is otherwise known as a taser. So This was essentially an early taser that Thing has that he's threatening the others with. We talked briefly in the Daredevil recap that they have decided that Sue's mini dress costume is now paired with blue leggings. So it's essentially just like she's thrown a mini skirt on top of her previous outfit. Which is, is a little bit like, why are we going about this? And then
still no mention that she's pregnant.
Still no mention that she's pregnant. I guess they're giving kids time to still buy that annual that's sitting on the spinner rack before they start talking about it in the regular book. On the final page, panel 2. So I'm going to get a little bit inside baseball here when it comes to some inking choices. Well, I don't know how much to put this on Sinnott and how much to put this on Simek. But on panel 2, look at the bottom part of the speech balloon, the one with the tail, and look at the smoke that seems to be kind of following that speech balloon. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real no-no. And so between Simek and Sinnot, it's not like either of them are amateurs or anything. It almost makes me wonder if the speech balloon was like a fixed job and they had to pace something up and it was big. Anyway, I don't know, but I find that baffling because of the experience of the two people who would be responsible for that.
Yeah.
But responsible, somebody was. That's all I really have to say about this. Other than that, I more or less endorse your opinion. Well, I guess I'm not as, oh man, this is the low point as you are, but I'm not going to argue that it's at all a high point.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Strange Tales.
Yes, let's do it. You have been quite brisk with your summaries recently, and I'm trying to do so, but
We got more books now, man.
I will do my best, but I'm like, oh, wait, how well do I remember this one? All right,
You will do your best to do your duty to God and your country, to obey the stout law, to obey the scout law.
Yes,
I don't know.
something like that. That's
Something.
from dimly in our childhoods. All right, so the cover is a shield cover. It says, "And the dragon cried death." It's a beautiful cover. Of course, it has the unfortunate portrayal of the Claw. I'll either be calling him the Claw or the Golden Claw as we go forward.
Yes.
But it is beautiful regardless. We have another even more unfortunate image on the splash page here. The credits. "And so that all will know who told this never to be forgotten epic, we proudly present the credits. Stan Lee, editor; Jim Steranko, writer/illustrator; Frank Giacoia, inker; Sam Rosen, letterer." So we've still got Frank Giacoia on inking duties, which...
Doing amazing work.
Yeah, he really is. And I think I said during one of the earliest Steranko issues that a lot of his groundbreaking work was actually in the inking. But he's not been inking, and he's still doing groundbreaking work.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, when we last left off, Fury was fighting this giant octopus, which I have supposed might have been not a swipe, but essentially an homage to the octopus in Prince Valiant that had been swiped by Dan Adkins. But they're in the middle of a fight. At one point, Fury takes what they call an oxygen tablet that allows him to live a little bit longer underwater. He is able to stab the octopus, make his way up, use a little spy gadget to get himself through some iron bars, and then blows up the octopus, it looks like.
This whole sequence is very similar to the original Prince Valiant sequence. He's got a little rusty iron bars he's got to get through, and this is all very similar to the Prince Valiant sequence.
Huh, okay, good, thank you. I did not have any idea. So we see the Yellow Claw has something that looks sort of similar, like a similar device to the Psi-Force, whatever they call it.
Esper Division.
Esper Division, thank you. To their Esper Division thing here, and he is seeing what AIM is doing and thinks, okay, I need to get some of the stuff that AIM is coming up with. We get introduced to a new S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, Clay Quartermain, who his smile can only be described as smarmy.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there are other words you could come up with, but smarmy is the first one and the only one that comes up to me.
It is the best one I can come up with that we are allowed to say on a clean podcast.
Yeah. So let's talk about the name Clay Quartermain. Do you think that that is supposed to put us in mind of the legendary adventure hero Alan Quatermain?
Is it not Quartermain?
It had never occurred to me that his name was not Quartermain, but somebody pointed out online that his name is actually Quatermain, and I went and looked it up, and by God, that's actually true.
Okay.
Yeah, but who knows if Steranko had ever realized that fact?
Yes. I don't know. That's an excellent question.
Yeah. We get Fury softening a little bit towards the Contessa, basically admitting that she has been quite helpful, and he needs her help at S.H.I.E.L.D. Meanwhile, he goes to AIM to try and, what is he trying to take the same weapon that the Yellow Claw is trying to take, if I recall correctly. And we have just a fantastic sequence of spy stuff and action stuff between AIM and Fury, aided by Quartermain.
And the docs. Oh, it's reminiscent of Ditko, how lovingly Steranko draws the docs.
Absolutely, yes. It's very much Ditko inspired, as it were.
And let's be clear, when we say that Clay Quartermain has a smarmy grin, he has it at all times, no matter what he's doing, no matter if life and death are on the line, no matter if he should be totally exhausted, he always has the smarmy grin.
Almost always. On the page where we see what they retrieved from AIM on page 9, we get to see him without a smarmy grin. But He looks... I don't know how to describe what he looks like on that one. He looks a little Steve Ditko-ish. He looks a little Fletcher Hanks-ish. Not quite sure. But it was this ornate Chinese dragon statue that AIM had. And they're trying to figure out what it is about it that made it so valuable to AIM. And while they're trying to figure that out, the yellow claw... Oh, I'm sorry, I just went ahead and did it. While trying to figure it out, the claw shows up and takes the statuette. And they're all freaking out about this. And then it turns out that this was all a setup, that S.H.I.E.L.D. knew that the claw was going to come and steal this thing. And so they had created a duplicate while they had the real one elsewhere for them to be able to study. Mm-hmm. They figured out that it's actually, if you strike it in the right way, it rings the name of a scientist. So depending on how you tap it, you either get Voss, Clay, Ling, or Tombe. And so they figure out, like, wait, those are all names of scientists. So they are now in a race with the claw to find these scientists before they are murdered by the claw. And they find each one of them dead until the final one. We see the scientist look up and see the claw coming towards him. And then he pulls off his mask, and it's actually Fury. And he's going to shoot back, but then just through sheer, like, hypnotic willpower or something like that, he's able to stare down Fury, and Fury faints. And at that point, the claw shoots him with a science fiction gun, and Fury seems to be gone. He's disintegrated. Yeah. No more.
Disintegrated.
Yeah.
And well, so much for Nick Fury.
So much for Nick Fury. He was a good character while he lasted. In terms of the grasp that people might have of Asian cultures and languages, at the very last panel, the claw says, "You see, Fury-san, you simply cease to exist." That's Japanese.
Yeah.
That ain't Chinese, and I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be Chinese. Anyway, that's that story. What say you?
I thought it was a great story. This is just absolutely gorgeous. Stranko's still just at the peak of his powers, has not dipped at all. It is amazing to read. I love that he has his own machine, very similar to the S.H.I.E.L.D. Esper machine, but his is called the Id-Receptor of the Psionic-Revelation Eavesdropper.
Is that supposed to be an acronym? I forget. Was that
IRPRE? I don't think so.
No. Okay.
But I've told before this story on this podcast about how I got in trouble for using the word id on a spelling contest when I was in 3rd grade and was told that I'd made that word up. But no, it's in comic books all the time. I love Clay Quartermain as a character. He's a great new addition to this book. Stranko is still very much dedicated to bringing in his own supporting cast and adding great characters. Clay Quartermain will then star in a great storyline when Peter David and Todd McFarlane are doing the Hulk many years later. And Clay Quartermain sort of turns against S.H.I.E.L.D. to help them get rid of the gamma bombs. But then when everything goes down and they all are about to be arrested, suddenly Quartermain turns into a version of Oliver North and testifies before Congress in such a way where he wins the country over to his side. And it's a very good storyline from at first McFarlane, and then Eric Larson takes over just for the last issue.
So one thing about that is I was doing some Googling about this character, and apparently the bad guys they're fighting, at least at one point in that longer storyline, is the Lords of the Living Lightning.
What? In the Peter David storyline?
Well, it's at one point when Clay Quartermain is leading the Howling Commandos, which are all like anthropomorphic animal creatures.
Oh, that's much later.
Oh, that's much later? Okay.
That wasn't Peter David.
Yeah, so in that one, they actually end up fighting the Lords of the Living Lightning.
Oh, okay. I assumed that we would never see them again.
Yep, as you stated. That's why I figured I should mention it. Oh, and can we talk about the majesty and the unfortunateness of the close-up on the claw's eyes on that last page?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's inked like a photo negative. So the shadows are all white and the negative spaces are all black. And it's really a fantastic piece of art. I think that probably it is I mean, I don't know. For any of the racist portrayals of Asian people in here, I think that one actually just sort of plays more as this man is monstrous.
Yeah.
But still, it's something to remark upon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely gorgeous. So much absolutely gorgeous art in this issue. The docs. Oh, the gorgeous docs. But also on page 11, where we have the supposed scientist working just under a little light at his table, surrounded by complete inky blackness. And then the claw enters into the light as he approaches in 3 silent panels. Just gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go and move on to the back half of the book.
All right. Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, 3 Faces of Doom. Stan Lee eminently MCs this Jim Lawrence, Dan Adkins planetary pulse stopper, lettered by the quivering quill of Al Kurzrock. And as we talked before, well, they keep on putting these obscure writers on Doctor Strange, which is especially weird because they've had this ongoing Shaggy Dog story for over a year now, and cycling through different writers and different artists.
Yes, so many different artists and writers have touched the same storyline. I looked it up. This storyline has been going since issue 147. So this is the 17th issue of this storyline.
Yes.
There's been a succession of villains, but it's all been one day for Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange has not had a chance to take a nap since issue 147, 17 issues ago.
Yeah, so this is the second 12-issue plus storyline that Doctor Strange has been in. But, as we discussed earlier, the S.H.I.E.L.D. story we're reading right now is the first 12-issue storyline that Marvel did.
According to Jim Stranko.
According to Jim
when
Stranko.
You spoke to him last year.
That is correct.
Clearly wrong.
Yes. I did not think that it was worth asking him how he justified that at the time.
No.
So the Living Tribunal has returned. Doctor Strange has fixed the problem that was there to be fixed. So the Earth is no longer going to be destroyed. However, in order to dispose of the remnants of this evil, the Living Tribunal is going to kill Nebulos. But Nebulos is the only one who knows where Victoria Bentley has gone. So Doctor Strange is like, oh, even though we've now saved the Earth, I won't let you do what you were going to do because I need to save Victoria Bentley. The Living Tribunal and Nebulos get into a big fight. Doctor Strange is sort of peripheral to this, but the Living Tribunal at one point sends this sort of sparkly lightning thing to attack Doctor Strange, and it looks unique and looks painful. This is on page 5, panels 1 and 2, and it looks almost like some kind of a paste up. It looks really like something that would have been more easily done with computer art, but Dan Adkins is doing it the old-fashioned way here.
Well, probably swiping from somewhere.
But just the execution of it is something else. At one point, how do the flames of the Faltine end up on the Living Tribunal here? Oh, he summons unto himself the flames of the Faltine, which shall in turn be hurled against this planet. So he continues this fight with Nebulos.
I certainly recognize on page 6 when Living Tribunal is aflame. I certainly recognize that from some sci-fi paperback, but I don't remember which one.
Okay. The battle continues, and the planet that Nebulos is on is getting ripped to shreds. Doctor Strange is trying to get what he needs to be able to rescue Victoria Bentley before this planet is destroyed, and indeed, he's able to swipe the polar power wand or whatever it is from Nebulos as he's being destroyed in the crumbling planet. The Living Tribunal seems quite impressed with this mortal and what he has gone and accomplished, standing against immortal creatures of cosmic power, and says, "Thus I send you now with the speed of thought," one of Stan Lee's favorite phrases, "to that even though he didn't write this. I wonder if I don't know. That's interesting. To the terrifying world where Nebulos did imprison the Earth Girl. But beware, valorous one, for what awaits you there are dangers more ghastly than human mind dare conceive." Strange responds, "Whatever they may be, I must face them for the life of Victoria Bentley." Next ish, Nightmare. So have we seen Nightmare since the very first Doctor Strange story? Have we seen him appear at any other point?
He has reappeared. He appeared more than once in the Ditko years, but I'm not sure they're saying that next issue the actual character Nightmare will appear. It may just be next issue is sort of a nightmare storyline. I don't know. I did not assume it would be nightmare, but we'll see.
And I love that one panel at the very end, the final panel of this story, the texture that Dan Adkins uses to give dimension to Strange's face is really quite striking.
Yeah, really beautifully inked. I assume this is a swipe. I assume that every single page in this book is either a swipe from a Ditko Doctor Strange or a sci-fi paperback. And that certainly applies to this. I thought about posting it on Comic Swipes and asking people, what's this a swipe from? Because some people there are good at doing that, but I haven't done it.
So your thoughts on this story?
Again, shockingly good all swipe art, and a fun story. They had a lot to live up to. Marvel has never done a 17-issue storyline before, and this issue pretty much wraps it up. This issue, it turns out, the Living Tribunal has come. He has passed judgment on the Earth, but Doctor Strange has saved the Earth. He has come up with a way to essentially eliminate all the evil magical energy on Earth, suck it all up into Baron Mordo, then suck it all out of Baron Mordo into the Polar Wand, and then have Living Tribunal defeat Nebulos, but Strange then zips down and gets the Polar Wand at the last second and will only give it to Living Tribunal if he helps him rescue Victoria Bentley, which he does. This is a fun story. This is good. Lawrence does a good job on the dialogue. As you say, it's very Stanley-esque. Atkins does a great job on the penciling and inking, despite constant swiping. This is a shockingly good story. It feels like a worthy wrap-up to a 17-issue storyline.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, that last panel that I was talking about, there's something about it. It looks like the Marshall Rogers, Terry Austin issues there.
Which is high praise indeed. It is. My first issue of Doctor Strange was issue 49, written by Rheta Stern with art by Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin, and really blew me away. And I've been a fan of the character ever since. And that just 6-issue run that Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin did is still one of my favorite runs of Doctor Strange. I thought that Dan Adkins softened the Living Tribunal too much. I really liked Marie Severin's very angular Living Tribunal, who looked, like sort of an abstract concept. He's got sort of just like a fleshy, naked dude body under the pen and inks of Adkins. I missed the way Marie Severin was drawing the character. It's fine. It's just a different take on the character, but I kind of miss the angularness. I thought that the big Living Tribunal Nebulous battle was similar to the big Dormammu Eternity battle that wrapped up the previous, what was essentially a 16-issue storyline. Not as good. Obviously Ditko doing Eternity versus Dormammu is going to be better than Adkins doing Living Tribunal versus Nebulous, but still worthy to be in conversation with it, which I think is high praise. Okay, let's go ahead and jump on to Tales of Suspense. Tales of Suspense featuring Captain America and Iron Man to be reborn. We have a Captain America cover. Captain America is falling and a bunch of people are trying to shoot him and kill him as if they needed to, since he is clearly falling to his death. What are the odds that there would be a flagpole to help him break his fall? I mean, the odds would be astronomically small that there would be a flagpole just in his way. So surely you need to shoot him and kill him. But first, let's go ahead and do Iron Man, who is also falling to his death. Invincible Iron Man, the deadly victory. Let's see what waits ahead only these panicky pussycats could show us, presented by Stan the Manly and Gene the Dean Colan, embellished by Frank Giacoya, lettered by Sam Rosen. So Giacoya, we just saw do an amazing job over Stranko and the S.H.I.E.L.D. story in Strange Tales. Now he is thankfully back here doing inking over Gene Colan in Iron Man and doing a very good job here once again. Two very different pencilers, Jim Stranko and Gene Colan, to be able to ink well, but he does a good job with both of them. So
that's called range.
They claim here that they can get away with this. I don't know if they can get away with this. I did not go back issue and check. But we've got Grey Gargoyle, who has turned Iron Man to stone, or at least turned his armor to stone, and is pushing him off the top of a building. Then suddenly Jasper Sitwell comes up, driving a big truck with a huge pile of sand in the back in order to catch Iron Man and cushion the blow so the stone doesn't shatter. And then there's a little footnote saying, "Lest any scoffers amongst you think we dragged this truck in out of left field, take a good look at our last ish. It was there all the time," says Sly Stan. Did you remember that or go back and look at it?
Neither one.
Neither one. I'm going to let him get away with that. It's a little iffy, a little fishy, a little suspicious, a little sus, as the kids would say these days. But apparently they set all this up in advance. Apparently it then takes Grey Gargoyle a full hour to make his way into the bowels of the Stark factory trying to find the cobalt bomb he was trying to steal, because by the time he makes it out, his 1 hour long effect on Iron Man has worn off. So then he comes out, he says, "Iron Man, you're still alive." So apparently he pushed him off the roof and did not stay long enough to watch him fall, and just assumed he fell and shattered, did not realize he had been saved by the sand truck. They get into a big fight. There's a cool bit here where it's hard to tell exactly what's going on page 11, but it looks like one of Iron Man's blasts has been turned to stone. And so you get sort of this electronic explosion turned to stone, which is kind of a cool image on page 11.
I'll allow it just because it looks cool.
They get in a big fight. Eventually, Iron Man realizes he can set his chest transmitter to a certain frequency in order to completely short circuit the cobalt ray device. And it also turns Grey Gargoyle into a human. But in order to do it, he has to short out his chest device and essentially kill himself. Grey Gargoyle is human. He is dragged away. But Sitwell realizes that Iron Man is dying and says, there's only one thing to do. I must remove his helmet. Now, presumably, he has his helmet set up in a way where your average citizen won't be able to remove it. But that is what Jasper Sitwell is claiming he's going to do at the end of this issue. And that is this issue. Steve, what do you think of it?
I thought it was good. I mean, Grey Gargoyle isn't my favorite villain in the world, but they pull things off relatively nicely in here. I will point out one of the things about why Grey Gargoyle isn't one of my favorites. He, at one point on page 4, when he gets the cobalt device, says, "It's mine, so long as I remember to touch it only with the insulated section of my glove. I'll be able to use it as I desire." It's just, they're always having to carve out little things like, well, why is this able to happen? Why can he do this? Why doesn't this happen? It's like, oh, we have to come up with all these silly little things about it. But, you know, I'm still enjoying Jasper Sitwell being in this book, and I'm glad that the villain, even though he did not stay to watch to see if the hero was killed, at least makes an attempt to kill the hero while he has the drop on him, rather than being like, no, I have an even better plan, which is always a worse plan.
The time is not right to kill the hero.
Yes, I must savor my victory.
Yes.
That would be too quick for him. It must last longer. And next issue, we are getting Whiplash, who was the main villain in the second Iron Man movie.
Yes.
Which when they announced that the villain was going to be Whiplash, I was like, Whiplash? What? You know, I was still used to superhero movies where it's like, no, you're going to go for the main villain for this particular character. And then if you do a sequel, okay, we're going to go for the next big main villain. And, you know, I was like, okay, so this is going to be like Mandarin, right? And then it's like Whiplash. I'm like, what?
And Mickey Rourke did a good job.
Oh, he did.
I liked Mickey Rourke's Whiplash.
Yeah, no, he did a fantastic job.
Even though I'm not a big fan of that movie.
No, neither am I.
So I say in my notes, Jasper Sitwell decides to take Iron Man's helmet off. Please do! ! Iron Man should not have a secret identity, as the first movie showed.
Yes.
So we've got Giacola doing a great job on Stranko in S.H.I.E.L.D. We've got Giacola doing a great job on Colin here in this book. In our mystery book will also be Giacola inking Colin, and I will not like the art in that book. So for some reason, the same combo I like on one book this month and not on the other. But the last book is still a mystery, so we will not reveal it yet.
Yes.
All right. Should we move on to the back half of this book?
Let's please do.
Let's please do. Okay. Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, To Be Reborn, an artfully offbeat Stan Lee and Jack Kirby action thriller, inking Joe Sinnott, lettering Sam Rosen. So this is, once again, an embarrassment of riches to have Sinnott now inking 2 of Jack Kirby's 3 books. Oh, if only he could have inked the third. If only he could be inking Thor as well. But no, he only inked the very first issue of Thor, turning into mystery number 83, and never getting Jack Kirby on Thor. We begin with a bizarre storyline. In the last issue, Steve Rogers had retired from being Captain America, handed in his shield to S.H.I.E.L.D., and revealed his public identity to the world. Well, then in this issue, we begin with Steve Rogers has been hauled in by the police to look at a lineup. And it's like, we thought you should see this. This is a bunch of bozos who all put on Captain America uniforms and all got in trouble with the law in various ways or had to be pulled in by the law because they were in trouble with other people. And they're all sort of apologetic now. Like, we didn't mean any harm. I only did it in order to get me a job with some carnival. Someone said, all I wanted to do was make my chick think I'm a big man. Third one says, I was a fool. I thought I could prove to the guys at the office that I'm as athletic as any superhero, even though he's got a big paunch belly. They're basically saying to Steve Rogers, like, this is what happens when you try to quit being a superhero. A bunch of yahoos take your place, which will be similar to the next time that Steve Rogers retires from being Captain America in the 70s. Someone will try to take his place.
Although this really doesn't make that much sense. It's like, oh, we now all know that Steve Rogers was Captain America. I mean, I guess they're saying they're supposed to be taking his place, but yeah, I don't know. It's a little weird.
Yeah. Steve Rogers is like, look, I don't care. I'm not going to become Captain America again. And so the cops say, just the same, it's going to be open season on you from now on. And that even goes for any poor slobs who happen to look like you. So then we cut to the mafia, or I guess it's not the mafia, who is called the Maggia in America, but some criminals are hiring someone named the Sniper, who is very good with fancy trick bullets, to kill Captain America, or just kill Steve Rogers. Meanwhile, we cut to yet another goober who has put on a Captain America costume, who is being chased across the rooftops of New York by goons trying to kill him, only to then fall off of a building. And guess who was inside that building? By sheer coincidence, Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers, by sheer coincidence, watches another Captain America outfit-wearing goober falling off of a building. And it says, but as fate would have it, with an assist from Stan and Jack, Steve Rogers at a nearby window hears the commotion. And another one, dressed like Captain America in deadly danger. I can't just stand by. He's losing his grip. By amazing sheer coincidence, Captain America realizes this guy falling, jumps out the window so he can fall to his death with him, but hooks his feet, this time not on a flagpole, on an aerial wire. If only the aerial wire I hooked my foot onto while falling will hold.
What is that?
An aerial wire? I like somebody hanging out there washing? I don't know.
I mean, and if it's a wire, that's just going to slice off your foot. Like what, it's like, I guess it has to be elastic, but yeah. And look at how far he's jumping in panel 3 on that page. Once again, I should have pulled these out as defense when I was told in the Rogues Galaxy story that you and I were working on, where he was jumping from one tower to another in that castle. They're like, can he fly? I'm like, no, it's a comic book. He's just jumping really far. And I'm like, look at this right here. Look at Captain America. He's doing the same.
I spoke too soon. He's caught on the aerial wire, but then the sniper shoots the aerial wire and blows it up. And then Captain America comes across that flagpole protruding below me, if I can hit it just right. So he does indeed bounce off of a flagpole onto the roof.
Spatwang.
Spatwang. S-P-T-W-A-N-N-G. Spatwang. The sniper is finally about to kill Steve Rogers and the phony Captain America, but then he sees another Steve Rogers in another window and blows it up. But it turns out that was just an LMD. And here comes S.H.I.E.L.D. in the form of Nick Fury and Dum Dum Dugan. Nobody told Jack Kirby that his old supporting cast was written out of S.H.I.E.L.D. a long time ago. The goons catch up to Steve Rogers and Captain America. Steve Rogers defeats the goons, realizes, I really cannot quit being Captain America. Like, I want to, I desperately need to, but I cannot quit because then Goobers will keep becoming Captain America in my place. So
because mere anarchy is loosed upon the world.
Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. So then he goes ahead and shakes Nick Fury's hand and says, all right, I'll go back to being Captain America. And Nick Fury's like, okay, are you going to try to reestablish your secret identity now? Because it's a little late for that. Next issue, The Black Panther, which is very exciting. We were both friends with Brian Stelfreeze back in the day, and we would love to have him come on and talk about some of these Black Panther books with us.
I'll email him again.
Email him again.
Yeah, I will.
Because we all came up in Atlanta together, but we've never managed to get him as a guest on this podcast, even though he would be a perfect person to talk about Black Panther with, because he had his own legendary run on the book. Okay, so that is this issue. I think this issue is great. I think this issue is just a lot of fun. It's a very clever way to force him to become Captain America again. I love these stupid people running around in the Captain America costumes. I love the characterization Stanley does on them. I just love this book. Obviously, it's completely insane, the whole jumping out of a building and catching yourself on aerial wires and flagpoles. But Jack Kirby, if he has earned anything else over his, at this point, many years in comics, he has earned the right to have people save themselves with flagpoles. Okay.
All right.
Let's go ahead and move on to what would be our last book of the month, but is not, Avengers.
Yes, indeed. So Magneto Walks the Earth. The cover, actually, this does not look like, this looks like a heck cover.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
That is the heckiest heck cover that ever hecked. Usually Marvel has the same person do the cover who does the inside, and Heck has been doing some guest issues of Avengers. He had been the regular Avengers penciler from issue 9 to issue 40, And then he was replaced by John Buscema, who has been the regular artist since issue 41, but Heck has already come in and do 2 sub-issues, the annual and issue 45. And I saw this cover. I'm like, oh no, Heck's back. I'd recognize that tiny, tiny Scarlet Witch waist anywhere. I'm like, oh, this is awful. This is awful. He's back. And then we open the book and it is gorgeous. We open the book and it is Buscema inked by Tuska, who I think we saw Tuska just a little bit at one point before. We saw him as a penciler before.
We saw him doing finishes over Jack Kirby's layouts in Tales of Suspense for a little while.
Right.
When they were still doing the World War II era stories. And there was the British trader who, it was that storyline.
But this is Tuska inking Buscema on the inside, and I love it, especially after that horrible Heck cover. I love Tuska inking Buscema on the inside. What did you think of it?
I really liked the art in this issue. I know that Tuska can apparently be a pretty divisive artist for people, but I've never had strong feelings one way or the other about him. But it certainly is good to have somebody other than Coletta inking John Buscema. Coletta
or George Bell, who's also been inking him and hasn't been doing a great job.
Yes, either one of those things. Magneto walks the Earth. Stan Lee proudly presents and polishes yet another Roy Thomas John Buscema two-man triumph. What's more, he even got George Tuska to ink it and L.P. Gregory to letter it. So Magneto, usually an X-Men villain, obviously, and the Toad had last been left off on this abandoned planet by the Stranger. Magneto is still ranting and raving, and the Toad is still toadying. But Magneto is feeling some kind of magnetic waves, kind of communication over magnetic fields somehow from far off in space. And it turns out that this is coming from a scientist in the United States who, do we actually get his name here or not?
Yes.
We do?
Yeah, they call him Dane Whitman.
Okay, right. So this is Dane Whitman, who will go on to become the heroic Black Knight that we will be seeing shortly in the very near future. But he is trying to make up for the crimes against society that his uncle had wrought as the villainous Black Knight. And we see a little bit of a flashback to that. Captain America, meanwhile, has just announced to the Avengers, presumably right before he announces it to the world, that he is retiring. The Avengers are not happy with this, and they all go off in their different directions to sulk. And we see that there is trouble in paradise for Hank and Natasha. The Wasp, meanwhile, is flexing some of her newfound wealth. She has bought herself a private jet and is going to be flying off somewhere with Hank.
But first, she is driven to the airport by her chauffeur, who is still the Whirlwind. Like, the whole point, Whirlwind, of going undercover as a chauffeur so you can kill the Avengers is like, okay, then you shoot your shot and you try to kill the Avengers. And if you fail, you don't go like, well, it's a good thing I still have that chauffeur job, and then keep chauffeuring the Wasp around. Like, you're just...
Do we know it's the same guy?
It says, soon, totally unaware that they have just been chauffeured by the sinister Whirlwind.
Oh, yeah.
They arrive at their destination.
Yeah, that is weird. Okay.
He's like, hey, man, it's a living.
Yeah. Meanwhile, beardless Hercules goes to Olympus to try and undo his banishment, but he gets to Olympus and finds that it is abandoned, and he has no idea why, but this is shocking, shocking news.
And Olympus could not look more gorgeous. Buscema is not born to do technology. He's born to do things like Olympus, and the Olympus on page 8 with the spectacular statues everywhere is just gorgeous.
Yes, absolutely. With the chariot riders and horses and archers and stuff all in statue, which is really just fantastic.
Yeah.
So it turns out that Dane Whitman's assistant, whoever this assistant is...
Norris.
Pardon?
Character's name, Norris, Norris.
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't care about his name.
Okay.
I was just meaning like this schlub who he hired the wrong schlub, because this guy has delusions of grandeur. And so he knocks out Dane Whitman and he's like, basically, this is very much like, who was the villain? I guess it was the Molten Man, where the Molten Man was the assistant to the scientist. Then it's like, I've been doing all the work you've been doing. I deserve this stuff. And so this is basically the same thing here, except what he ends up getting for his trouble is Magneto and Toad facing him. And he's
Yep.
suddenly like, this was a very bad idea. But we get just fantastic art in this castle. It makes no sense for there to be a castle with a dungeon in the New York area, but it just looks so fantastic. I'm fine. At one point, though, Toad says to Magneto, "Follow me, master. Such a place as this must house a dungeon. You are wise in the ways of magnetism, but the Toad knows about castles." Why does the Toad
Why?
know about castles? Why? Just because you're dressed like somebody who belongs in a castle?
Yes.
I guess so. So then we get to see a recounting of when Wanda and Pietro were saved by Magneto from peasants in somewhere in Eastern Europe. I just want to point out as we're going by on page 14, just that panel 3. I mean, what can be said about that down shot in this castle? There's a gargoyle up in our foreground and then completely shadowed stonework going down and then out onto the floor with a yellow light coming from an arched doorway lighting the two characters.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous panel. Absolutely gorgeous. Buscema loves castles,
Yes.
and we'll have a very healthy 30-year run doing Conan comics where he gets to do castles to his heart's content.
So Magneto has summoned Pietro and Wanda here, and it's a little weird how it happened. Pietro says, "I know no more than you, Wanda. As you know, the message was broadcast at random, and we merely intercepted it while we were on monitor duty." I have no idea what at random means in this case, but anyway, they get into the castle and then they're being attacked by, it says suits of armor, although these look like people the way that they're being drawn in here. But they're trying to figure out, they're like, these are suits of armor, even though they don't look like it, but we don't hear any mechanical noises in them or anything like that. And then they figure out eventually that Magneto is making them move. And a lot of these things do not look like metallic suits of armor, but that's fine. We will accept it as it is because it is gorgeous. So there's a big fight between Magneto and his suits of armor and Pietro and Wanda. And in the end, Pietro and Wanda are defeated. They're laying there unconscious, and Magneto is ranting and raving while the Toad is just ecstatic in his toadyism there, although looks just utterly horrifying on that final page.
Yes.
The shape of his face does not look human. Next-ish, all this and the blockbusting Black Knight 2. Enough said. There we go. What do you have to say?
I love everything about this issue. I love the art. I love the story. I think it's great to have Magneto and Toad back and a believable enough way to get them off planet and back here. I love the addition of Dane Whitman to the Marvel Universe. I always was a big fan of him when Buscema was back on the book in the 80s with Roger Stern writing. I always knew it was a somewhat silly character because he's got a sword and he can't actually cut anybody. You know, you're never going to once see him actually slice into anybody with his sword, which is the whole purpose of swords. But I still just loved him. I love the way he looked. He never even had that much of a personality. He was never, I was always very much aware he was a guilty pleasure as a character. He had a great look. It was fun. The idea of a crusading medieval knight on the Avengers, even though he couldn't really use the sword, even though he didn't have a big personality, I still loved him. And so it's great to have him here. He'll finally get to put on his beautiful costume next issue. I love the battle against the Metal Men. At first, it's like Metal Men, and then it becomes suits of armor. It is a wonderful battle, and all the more shocking and cool that they lose. I think it was a brilliant idea to put a terrible heck cover on the issue, lower our expectations as low as they could possibly be lowered, and then deliver great art on the inside. It may have resulted in lower sales from people who didn't pick up the issue because they thought that was going to be the art on the inside. But if you're committed to reading the thing like we are, it made for a very pleasant surprise.
So we have been teasing this big surprise this whole time. So, Matt, would you like to let us know what we have been waiting for?
This is sort of a bummer for me and Steve because we have been struggling to get through 9 superhero books a month. And here we have the very first month ever where Marvel Comics publishes 10 superhero books. Even when you're not counting Sergeant Fury and Not Brand Deck, we have a straight out, flat out introduction of a brand new superhero. He does not get his own book right away. His history of having his own book will fluctuate wildly. But first he is introduced in something that has been a reprint book, Marvel Superheroes. For issue 12, it says Marvel Superheroes featuring Captain Marvel. All new, never seen before. The coming of Captain Marvel, plus 5 all-time grades from the Golden Age. We have on the cover a presumably Colin Giacoya cover where already something's a little off. I just don't know. But we've got a guy who, even if you are familiar with the Marvel version of Captain Marvel, this guy looks nothing like what you're picturing. He is wearing a green helmet on a mostly white costume with green booties and gloves and trim, and a green ringed planet on the chest emblem. And this is the coming of Captain Marvel while a ship flies overhead and people on the street are looking at him with shock as he seemingly takes off a coat to reveal who he is.
So let's acknowledge for a moment that Captain Marvel was the name of one of the great Golden Age superheroes. He was sort of the Superman killer, as it were. He was more popular than Superman for a little while, and DC Comics, or whatever form DC Comics took at the time, actually sued the company that was publishing Captain Marvel and won a copyright or trademark lawsuit and put them out of business. Basically, essentially just saying, hey, look, this guy can fly, this guy has these powers, and then a jury or a judge or however this worked who didn't know anything about how superhero comics worked were like, oh yeah, sure, this totally looks like a ripoff. Well, Martin Goodman, the publisher of Marvel, has had a history of trying to snap up IP that happens to be laying around. And the Captain Marvel trademark came free, and he wanted to snap it up as quickly as possible, especially because now the comics company was being called Marvel.
Yeah, well, because DC had bought up and done away with the Captain Marvel character, but unfortunately they had done away with him too completely, and they had not brought him back occasionally for a rare Captain Marvel, miniseries or one-off issue or even a cover appearance on a Superman comic or anything like that. And so the trademark lapsed. Well, this led to a small rinky-dink comics company going like, hey, the Captain Marvel trademark has lapsed. Let's do our own Captain Marvel character, who was one of the wildest, most bizarre superheroes ever. Someone whose head popped off his body and hands popped off and feet popped off, and he would yell, split. And he would split himself into different pieces.
I had totally forgotten about that, but now that you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I've heard about this.
So then Marvel was like, well, crap, there is this other superhero who has Marvel in his name. We should definitely have the trademark for a hero with Marvel in their name. And this other company has been squatting on this trademark without doing anything to actually reestablish the trademark themselves. So this is anybody's game. This is the Wild West at this point. So we can swoop in and create a hero called Captain Marvel. Why they did not create a better hero named Captain Marvel, I cannot tell you, because they did not bring their A game to this comic. They then start publishing Captain Marvel comics first in Marvel Superheroes, and then they start his own comic, Captain Marvel #1, that's going to start in a few months. But then they cancel it, and then they uncancel it, and then they cancel it again. And then they uncancel it, and then they make it bi-monthly, and it limps along through the 70s, and then they decide to kill off Captain Marvel. And then they're like, oh crap, we're going to lose the trademark again. So then they have to bring in a new Captain Marvel, the Black woman Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau. She is Captain Marvel for a while, and then she disappears. And they're like, oh crap, we're going to lose the trademark again. And then they bring back Marvel's son, and he's Captain Marvel for a while, and then he gets killed off. And then they're like, uh-oh, here we go again. And then they decide to rename Ms. Marvel as Captain Marvel, which is what has been going on these days. And then they went ahead and made a Captain Marvel movie starring the character who was originally known as Ms. Marvel as Captain Marvel. Meanwhile, they made another character into Ms. Marvel because now they were in danger of losing that trademark. And then she got her own Marvel TV show. So, folks, we have not gotten into discussing this issue yet because we have been discussing legal matters. But
so talking about the content of this, I will just say the splash page. Is it just me, or does this look like Steve Ditko Captain Atom?
Yes, it does. Well, what this really reminds me of is the upcoming cover to Iron Man #1 when he gets his own book, where for some reason, when Gene Colan wants to introduce a new hero, he's like, this person must be manspreading at 180 degrees. Split, indeed. He should be yelling split, just like his predecessor with this name. The Marvel Comics Group presents The Coming of Captain Marvel, Phase 1, and so it begins, the greatest new superhero of all, presented with pardonable pride by Stan the Man Lee and Gene the Dean Colan, embellished by Frank Giacoya, lettered by Artie Simek. Now, this is an interesting idea. And indeed, I would like Captain Marvel better when he is done in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes TV show. I would like him better when he is done in the Ultimate version, Ultimate Nightmare by Warren Ellis. I would like him better when they sort of incorporate this version of the character a little bit into the Captain Marvel MCU movie. But I think that this issue, for whatever reason, even though it's kind of a cool idea, an idea that will work better later, I don't think it works very well here. But we begin with this idea that we have had 2 issues recently of the Fantastic Four in which they have been interacting with an intergalactic empire called the Kree. Well, it turns out the Kree have now had their curiosity piqued by the Earth. But one thing I've always liked about Stan Lee is that he never has a completely evil race. He's always has various shades of humanity in every race. And here indeed we get the Kree, the seemingly evil empire that is flying down to Earth in a Cohen ship. I never liked Cohen's technology very much, and I'm not a big fan of this spaceship. But they are going to send a Captain Marvel down to the planet, and Captain Marvel is a rather honorable guy, which shows that this is not a completely evil race, which I like a lot. He's also in love with the ship's medic, who seems like an honorable woman. Her name is Una, but unfortunately his captain, Jan Rog, or I guess is he a captain? What
he would have to be the next thing up. What, a mate?
Colonel.
No, Colonel, yes.
Yes, quiet, my darling. You know the Colonel's real motive. So long as he loves you, but knows that your heart belongs to me, he'll do anything to keep us apart.
This is basically a David and Bathsheba kind of situation.
I never got that far in reading the Bible, so I'll take your word for it. They give him a little drink. They do all sorts of stuff they will regret later. They establish that he has to have his helmet on to breathe, or he has to have drunken this drink, which will allow him to keep his helmet off for an hour. Eventually, they'll realize, wait, that was a mistake. We want to have our hero with his helmet off. We don't want a hero who has to have his helmet on all the time or has to be constantly drinking a drink in order to breathe. They will regret all of these decisions not too long later. But he goes ahead and takes his drink and puts on his helmet and goes down to the planet. And he's got a little tube that I think is just basically his sleeping bag and change of clothes. But it's sort of an interesting tube-like thing he's carrying around.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, he then arrives at a missile launch. And you would think like, okay, these are aliens from outer space. They're going to take an interest in our missile launches. But no, it's just coincidence. It's just sheer coincidence. What have I stumbled upon? Question mark, question mark. It's some sort of isolated missile base. So then he, of course, sabotages the missile launch. We have talked about this before, how Stan Lee constantly has sabotaged missile launches.
But this is by accident. He doesn't do it on purpose.
He does it by accident. Yeah, they establish that, like all great space superheroes, because the gravity is different on Earth, he can leap around and he's got greater strength. He is attacked by the military, who are upset that he has run their missile launch. He then shows that he has nonviolent weapons, which is really interesting. He's got a blackout ray, which just sucks all the light out of the air, and that enables him to get away. He then goes ahead and switches into civvies. We see that he has white hair, another decision that they will regret. I think it's cool. I think he looks really cool with white hair. I always liked him with white hair. Mm-hmm. Eventually, when Jim Starlin takes over the book and finally turns this into a great book, he, I would guess, was probably told by editorial, hey, you've made this into a really great character, but kids don't dig the white hair. Go ahead and make him blonde. But eventually they'll make him blonde. That's basically it. He's still hanging out in his hotel room when the issue ends, and he's told that a sentry...
He gets a message from the home planet telling him that he has been chosen for a task because Ronan the Accuser was repelled. And so now the home planet is essentially giving him new orders. That's my understanding.
Yes. Okay. Let's say that. And then the issue ends anticlimactically without an escalation or conclusion. I think this issue is shockingly weak. This character is shockingly misconceived, even though I like the basic concept of a noble member of this seemingly evil empire is sent to infiltrate the Earth and has misgivings when he, discovers the basic decency of Earth people, which we don't really get to that full version of this concept in this issue. But I like that concept. I like the way it was done on Avengers vs. Mightiest Heroes. I like the way it was done in the Ultimate Universe. I like the way it was done in the Captain Marvel movie. But I just don't think this issue works. And I'm really shocked by the art. This is the same art team who did Iron Man this month and did just a much better job on Iron Man this month. I mean, part of the problem here is that they're relying on someone else's character designs. Here, relying on Cohen's own character designs. I think that these are poorly designed characters. What did you think, Steve?
Well, look at page 11, final panel on that page.
Yes.
I mean, I guess you could think that that's sort of Frank Robbins-ish, maybe.
We should explain that this is a panel of Captain Marvel leaping out of the way after he has sucked all the light out of the world of the soldiers. And he is ludicrously spread eagled once again. He is spread eagled at a 180-degree angle. Again, as he leaps across from one rocky outcropping to another.
Well, and his chest is sort of stuck out in a really unnatural sort of way, and then his head is way far back on that chest, and it's just, yeah, I mean, if that picture had been used in not brand Ech, it would have been completely appropriate. Right.
Yeah.
But not so much here. Yeah, I don't know. And actually, the top panel on that page looks almost like Gil Kane was in the office that day and they asked him to redraw that one. I don't know exactly what's going wrong here, but nothing about this, well, not nothing about this works. You know, Colin really seems to come to life when he's drawing non-super powered people. And so, like, page 9, all the action with the soldiers there is really quite well done. But for the most part, you know, there are some, I'm sure there are some people who are already mad at us right now because this hero does have a lot of strong supporters out there. But even so, I'm not sure how many of them are supporters of him from the beginning.
Right. Oh, no. Like when Jim Starlin takes over this book, it's one of my favorite Marvel books. I absolutely love it. It's wonderful. Even some of the later, you know, Pat Broderick had a good run on Captain Marvel. And later, when other people do versions of this character, when Peter David and Chris Cross were doing their version of Marvel's Son, I liked that book a lot. You know, there have been good runs with various permutations of this character for various variations of Marvel and then various permutations of him after his death that I've liked quite a bit. I just think this book gets off to a rocky start.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Things could be better. So,
yes.
I mean, it really does just come across as a trademark grab.
Yes.
Just, we need something now. Come on, people. Let's get to it. Okay. Also, have we yet seen a Kree who is blue?
No, I don't think so.
So far, the Kree seem to just be European-skinned race, which later they will famously be blue, but then there will be some pink Kree and blue Kree, basically, and there's a whole thing about evolution and how they're at some, anyway, there's a whole thing that's involved in that. But I find it interesting that we've gotten this far into hearing about the Kree and never seen any of them being blue.
Yes, and it would make no sense at all if this character was blue because he's infiltrating the Earth.
Right. That's why they have to later come up with this whole story about some of them being European-skinned and some of them being blue-skinned, which, you know, as you said, I've made some huge mistakes. So that's it. Hopefully not a particularly anticlimactic end to this big build-up for our new
I had a few
book.
more things to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. I'll just slink away then. I'll just quietly pack up my bags.
Please proceed.
I had a couple more notes. One note, Una sure is weepy. She is his weepy love interest who is always crying about one thing or another. I say everything about this issue will be jettisoned in the coming years. Una and Jan Rog will be killed off. The helmet will come off. He'll get a prominently colored costume. The white hair will become blonde. I ask the question, what would Kirby or Buscema make of this issue? Or even Marie Severin, what would she make of this issue? It just feels like Colin was the wrong choice. It feels like he did not connect to this material at all.
So, yes, we have come to a possibly anticlimactic conclusion to this episode, but nonetheless, we have been introduced to a new character who will go on to, as we have already talked about, some historic significance.
Yes, and I think this book will be bi-monthly at first, so we're going to go back to $9 for our next 2 episodes.
Yes. Okay. So, do you have anything else that you would like to add before we wrap up this episode?
It wraps up the year of 1967. We've been covering 1967 for a long time on this podcast, and it has been an epic year for Marvel Comics. Some of the greatest Marvel comics of all time, some of the less than great Marvel comics of all time. But certainly, I would say if I had to award this year to one person, I would say Steranko. I would say this was Steranko's year. A lot of fantastic work from everybody, but in the end, Steranko's year.
Okay. I was not prepared to pick a winning creator here. So just to be ornery, I will say John Buscema. It's John Buscema's year.
John Buscema had a great year, too.
Although he just came in right towards the end of it. Oh, and Matt, we're always asking people here to rate and review this podcast to help us out. And I realized, you know what? I should do that for your other podcast. So yes. I went ahead and gave you a 5-star rating and a little 1-sentence review. So,
oh, fantastic. I'll go check that out. We've already gotten more reviews on the new podcast than we ever got on Secrets of the Story podcast in its 10 years or Marvel Reread Club in its 5 years. we've already gotten more reviews than the new one because I have somehow found myself paired with an extremely enthusiastic promoter for this new podcast who has been really getting the word out and really doing fantastic work. Yes, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, everybody, go listen to A Good Story Well Told, my new podcast with Jonathan Auxier. In the most recent episode, we discussed Slaughterhouse-5, which Jonathan has never read, and I shame him into finally reading it. And it is a lot of fun. I had previously announced on this podcast that on that podcast, we were going to be doing a comic book, which we ended up not doing. We were going to do V for Vendetta, and we never did it. But that'll be possibly saved for the second season.
All right. And what I thought you were going to say is that if you enjoy this podcast, then maybe people could rate and review this one because it costs you nothing and it really helps us out.
Yes. Or you could do something that does cost you something, and you could give money to our Patreon.
Yes.
Just give us money. It costs you nothing, people. Oh, wait. Actually, it does. It literally costs you something.
Indeed. Okay. Thanks, everybody out there, for listening. We really appreciate having an audience to hear us talk about this stuff. And we will be back in your ear holes in a couple of weeks.
For 1968.
1968. Groovy. Is that the Summer of Love?
Yes, that's the Summer of Love.
Yes.
Or was that 60? No, I guess 67 was the Summer of Love.
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, one way or the other, 1968 is going to be a hell of a year in American history. So,
yes.
Join us, won't you, for that when we come back and begin it next episode. All right, thank you, everybody. Take care and stay safe out there.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.